September 1961, the day the Women's Charter came into effect. This signaled a turning point for Singapore women, ensuring them protection and equality. They could now forge ahead, unfettered by past restrictions. In the past, women's roles were limited. They were financially dependent on their menfolk, and they had few opportunities for education.
Education for girls was still a privilege of the children of enlightened and well-to-do families, and the majority of girls and women stayed at home. The very poorest women had to work just for survival, and they did menial jobs.
Wives were vulnerable. If their husbands ill-treated or abandoned them, they had little means of finding jobs to support themselves and their children. A man who could afford to had more than one wife or concubines. He could also divorce his wife on minor grounds such as her being barren, disrespectful to his parents, or talkative. Each community had its own customary marriage practices and documents. Several clan associations organized mass weddings so that marriages had some measure of public acknowledgement. In the 1950s, several groups of women lobbied for changes in legislation to protect and give women legal rights. Women like the late Madam Chan Choi Seong, who was a member of the People's Action Party, rallied support from within the PAP. Pressure for reform legislation also came from other women who made the public aware of unequal treatment of women, women's problems, and its effects on society in general. For the past 60 years, Mrs. Shireen Fodster has been campaigning on issues related to women. In the 1950s, her group had to deal with those who opposed the idea of equality for women on the grounds that it undermined traditional values. Her group also sought vital political support.
Then I had to go and see Mr. Lee Kuan Yew and Dr. To Chin Chai. They were both leaders of the PAP, and asked them what they would do if they came into power.
The new government set into motion the political and legal machinery to bring about the Women's Charter. The PAP's manifesto outlined important national issues, including a better life for women in independent Singapore. Marriage laws were to be amended to make polygamy illegal for all non-Muslims. It was felt that this would lead to a stable family. The Women's Charter, which came into operation on the 15th of September 1961. The Charter gave Singapore women individual legal rights. The new laws made marriage registration compulsory. It also covered divorce and offences against women and girls.
Be faithful to him so long as you both shall live.
Yes, I do.
If this ring,
I know you.
The public solemnization of a marriage made it a legal contract. After marriage, a woman continued to have her own legal rights. The Charter made it clear that she could retain her own surname, acquire, hold, or dispose of property, be employed in any trade, profession, or social activity, enter into contracts on her own. She can also sue and be sued in her own right. The Charter also specified grounds for divorce. A wife, for instance, who was unfairly treated could divorce her husband, who would legally still be expected to provide for her and their children. In this way, the Charter gave security to a woman who would otherwise be at her husband's mercy. The Women's Charter did not apply to Muslim wives, as they were protected by Islamic laws. These laws, administered by the Sharia court, allowed a Muslim woman to petition for divorce. In cases where a Muslim woman was divorced, she could apply for a consolatory gift from her ex-husband. Even after the Charter, many couples still underwent traditional marriage ceremonies to retain their customs. But if something went wrong, women still had access to protection through the Charter.
I think women were, in fact, rather excited by this. It provided them protections that they had not had before. On the other hand, a number of middle-aged couples who had been married, say, during the Japanese War, when ceremonies were at a minimum, began to worry about their marriages, and some rather older groups went back to the registry in order to register their marriages, although in fact the law didn't require this.
In 1973, the government announced that all unregistered marriages after mid-1967 would not be recognized. There was then a scramble to get marriages registered, and the number of registrations rose by some 33% that year. Over the years, the Charter has been scrutinized and improved through a series of amendments. Review boards studied changing social needs and the initial impact of the Charter. The law now recognizes a wife's non-monetary contribution, entitling her to a share of the matrimonial property. A battered wife can get a court injunction ordering the husband not to assault her or the children. The 7-year period before divorce has been reduced to 3. And a woman petitioning for divorce is no longer responsible for finding the fault for the marriage breakdown anymore. Wong, who has researched divorce in Singapore, explains the practical implications of the amendments.
But under this new law, as long as there's good enough evidence to show irretrievable breakdown, this would actually minimize the trauma that the couple would have to go through, or the individual.
Today, the Charter has become so interwoven in the fabric of Singaporean life that some are quite unaware of it.
What are the laws? I have to do a bit of reading up first. I don't really have very much comments on that.
I think a lot of people have taken the Women's Charter for granted. Meanwhile, things have changed a lot for women. Women have come out in work, in all spheres of social and economic activities. And I think in this regard, they have not found it necessary to sort of keep referring back to the Women's Charter to assert their rights.
Legislation alone, however, does not ensure a better quality of life. While the Charter may have set the pace and mood for progressive changes, one must also consider the effects of wider social political developments.
Apart from legislation, you need real opportunities for women in education, in employment, in all spheres of social and political life. And then, of course, society's attitude towards women and the recognition given to women's contributions to society would also need to open up and to change along with the times. So legislation alone is not enough, but it is basic, it is there, it provides women with some kind of a guarantee in case the woman needs to have recourse to the law.
Since the Charter was enacted, women have made use of education and employment opportunities and have acquired new roles. They are found in various levels of employment. Today, in a climate of equality, the Singapore woman can reach for whatever she aspires.